Welcome to Conversations with CNews. I am Dion Batiste. I am now joined by Nikoli Edwards, who is the Vice Chairman for Policy, Advocacy and Projects in the Commonwealth Youth Council. Nikoli, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
As the conversation on rape culture rages on here in Trinidad and Tobago, do you think that the term rape culture aptly describes what happens here?
Yeah, I do think so, because if you would limit it, as persons have been doing, to simply catcalling or a grab or a pass here and there, you would find that a lot of those persons would have the potential to go on and actually commit the act of physical rape, penetrative rape. But the instance of that kind of emotional scarring, that in and of itself is rape. And persons need to understand that in no form or fashion is that okay or acceptable, because of the trauma that goes along with that. We have been cultured as young men, as a society, to think that a lot of the things that we do, which are misogynistic, are fine and okay. And that is how we've been going for some time. And it's only because we're seeing so many instances where this thing has escalated beyond what we thought would have been normally boys at play or men just simply catcalling, and nothing is wrong with that. We're seeing the manifestation of what that has led to insofar as death. Persons have died as a result of what simply started off as catcalling. Imagine you're in a party as a female, and because you don't whine with a guy who approaches you to dance with him, he instantly takes on this kind of aggressive demeanor where, well, dies you and lashes out. And there has been a case where persons have actually been physical as a result of not getting a wine.
So it's basically, how dare you tell me no?
Yeah, and we need to see it for what it is. It is a serious issue. This is not something that is hyped. This is not something that is simply will pass in 9 days. As Trinidad and Tobago, we know that 9-day culture. This is not that. This seems to be here and has been here for some time, but it's how we deal with it as a society moving forward.
And how do you think we should deal with it moving forward?
It has to definitely be a multi-pronged approach. One, the government has a very important role to play in the eradication of violence against women and girls, the eradication of gender-based violence. And the thing about it, what is baffling for me, we have a ministry or a ministry of gender and youth, a department under the office of the Prime Minister, but yet formally, we do not recognize gender in this country, at least from the legislative standpoint, because we do not yet have the insertion of the word gender in our constitution. And that poses problem to the Equal Opportunities Commission, because they can look at discrimination in many forms, but they cannot look at it in terms of gender. And the law is actually explicit where it zones in on sex as opposed to gender. So what we do need is the insertion of that word gender in the Constitution, and not even a gender policy, which has been talked about since Thy Kingdom Come, would solve that problem, because a policy simply, or the government saying that this is what we intend to do, or this is the way things should be done, but just do it. So insert the word gender, and that can lead to the police service having a category of crime called gender-based violence, because in Trinidad and Tobago, gender-based violence is not a recognized term, especially when you come to crime-fighting initiatives. So that is a serious problem, and that once that word, and many people may think, well, that's just a small word, but look at the power and the effect, the ripple effect that will have in how we treat with that as a society. Education is very, very important. Health and family life education specifically. Before, the conversation would have centered on sex ed, right? But we needed more than just sex ed, and therefore the health and family life education came to the fore, and it has been implemented in some schools, but there is not an overhaul attitude, overarching attitude by the ministry, by the government, by teachers and whatnot to implement and fully roll out health and family life, HFLE, in the curriculum across the school. And just imagine where there is a gap with parents not being home, parents not teaching their children about sex, and you actually seeing where young girls are getting their period, entering puberty earlier and earlier, and they're not having that kind of education and that kind of contact where they can speak to someone when they're at school, where they could speak to someone outside of the home and whatnot about the things that they're going through, because they themselves do not know. So we definitely need that involved in the the curriculum in the schools in a big way. So those are at least two things that we can do as a society, as a government, to ensure that the issue of gender-based violence is given the kind of attention that is necessary to end the kind of culture that we've created in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay. Do you think, or what do you think has to happen for people to have faith in the police service to correctly address instances of rape culture or gender-based violence?
So, as I said, the police service itself is weak in terms of there is so much that the police service can do with the limited legislation to treat with that. So that's where the insertion of the word gender and leading to a category of crime called gender-based violence. Once that happens in the police service, then we can realistically expect the police service to be trained or retrained to treat with such issues, because there are no real policies in place or procedures in place to treat with gender-based violence. It is treated as domestic violence in some instances. It may be treated as a person who is physically attacking or whatnot. It can be treated as harassment and these different things, but you do not have it being treated in such a way where you recognize that it is gender-based violence, and there are certain codes and principles that go along with that in how you roll out that. Look, for instance, I'm sure we remember that incident at Five Rivers, I think that police station, where a woman who was about to be kidnapped or something, or was in an incident, and she went to the police station completely naked, and they did not know how to handle that situation, and they turned her away, right? Understanding that this is a female and something has happened to her, there should be certain ways to deal with issues like that, and we do not have that proper sensitization as a society, especially, and then to it, the society is one way. How can we realistically expect the police service to really go above and beyond what they know and what they are accustomed to treat with this issue the way it is required to be treated?
Okay, how do you think, or why do you think, rather, so many people seem to be okay with trivializing the whole conversation on rape culture, especially taking into consideration how many women have come forward to share their experiences, be it via TV, radio, or social media?
So, because the thing is, this conversation has come up and is creating the wrongs, making the wrongs in terms of now it's part of our everyday discussion. But at the same time, when you look right around the corner, what do we have? Carnival coming up. And Carnival seems to be the celebration of the female anatomy in many instances. When you look at our ads that are right around, when you look at things in the newspaper, on the television, sex sells. So the right conversations are taking place in one corner, but at the same time it's not being properly reinforced in another corner, because this seems to just be our culture, where it's okay to go and whine on anyone that you feel you want to whine on. The music as well, a thief in a wine, are doing this, that, and the other. People need to understand how we have been priming ourselves as a society to see rape culture as being okay. This has been done over years and years, and now it's very hard, apparently, to break away from that, because you do not have all hands on deck in terms of how do we tackle this issue. We will forever believe that sex sells. These ad agencies, when they're looking at revenue versus an issue that is plaguing women, and they would start to quantify, because society is starting to justify this, quantify, yes, 45 women or 40-something plus women out of the how much ever hundreds of women or persons rather would have been murdered. We look at it that, okay, that's a small number. We start to quantify these things, and when it does not look exorbitant, when it does not look abnormal, we accept it as it's just a simple peak, and then there will be a valley in terms of that data. So we do not fully accept that one life lost is one life too many. One female who has been a victim of gender-based violence is one victim too many. And until we start to have that kind of thinking, we won't reach anywhere.
Catcalling is not new to Trinidad and Tobago. Men feeling free to grab and grip on a woman while she walks the street is not new to Trinidad and Tobago. Why do you think that now the conversation seems to have really taken root and people are coming on board with the movement to try to eradicate rape culture?
Because for one, I do think that today women are a bit more vocal about it, because when you look at that young lady who was on the promenade, and she was being harassed by these men who were saying derogatory things to her, she got to the point where she put it on social media, where she was retaliating, and we're now starting to see instances where women are fighting back, and they have such a platform now which they can express themselves. The Life in Leggings is a wonderful movement to bring attention to the issues that we are facing right now when it comes to gender-based violence and women being harassed and whatnot. So I do think now is a good time in history where we as a society, we're actually standing up and saying, no, enough is enough. There will be the naysayers, there will be the persons who are saying, so what about men? And we have our problems too. Yes, but when you look at it, women and young girls are more vulnerable in society. When you look at a man's strength, a physical strength versus that of a woman, and as well as sometimes that fear that grapples a person, because we are taught in such a way, women are taught that you must be careful. Be very careful. Watch out your surroundings, this, that, and the other. Men, on the other hand, they do not get that lecture as well as a woman. So in that, you see women are already being taught to be extremely careful. They walk with that fear every day that they leave their house, and sometimes they even have that fear within their homes. I remember as a boy growing up, when I was in my teens and whatnot, I would have been going out to parties all hours of the night. I don't know how I'm reaching, and don't know how I'm going to return home. That was a privilege that I had that other women or other females my age did not have, because they would have been a greater victim, or they were in better stead for something to happen to them versus me. Right? And I'm not saying that things do not happen to young men, to men in general and stuff, but the fact is that women and girls are more vulnerable to the attacks, especially when it comes to gender-based violence. When it comes to any kind of sort of violence that takes place, you would see that women usually are greater victims when it comes to that. We're not talking about gang warfare, because that is something that is a red herring, that is a distraction. It comes just like you see in the United States that Black Lives Matter, and then the argument is that black people are killing black people off and whatnot. Yes, we acknowledge that. But the fact is that they are more prone in that instance when they come in contact with a white police officer and they are a black pedestrian or whatever the case is. The same thing applies. Women stand a greater chance of sexual harassment in the workplace, sexual harassment in school, sexual harassment in their communities, down to even the church, right? And we need to acknowledge this and take this forward for what it is.
It's often said that women should be careful and women should not be walking around alone. They should move around in groups and take responsibility for their safety. In response to things like that, some people are saying, why not hold men accountable for their actions instead of trying to put everything, the burden of everything on the woman? Care to respond to that?
The thing is that, why is it that society has to be so unequal where certain rules are given to women versus men? It should be equal right across the board, where if you're saying that a woman should walk in groups and whatnot, men should be walking in groups as well. And that's where we have the inequality in society. And the fact is, yes, as I was stating earlier, women are more prone to these attacks. We need to create an enabling and a safe environment for all persons involved, but understanding that right now we need to take care of our women and our girls in society. It should not be, because what we're doing a lot of the time is blaming the victim. When it comes to women and we say to them after they've been attacked or raped that they should not have been wearing this, that they should not have been dancing this way, that they should not be doing X, Y, and Z and the other. And we're not understanding that a woman has a right to her body. A woman has a right to carry herself in the way that she sees fit, right? But instead, we want to put women in a box and tell them this is how they must behave. Little girls are to be seen and not heard, and these different things. So we see where from a young age this is being taught to women, that they must conduct themselves in such a way or else, right? And there should not be any or else, because you have men who on one end are taught differently, but they still, in many cases, are victims to a lot of the issues. And you still have men who are taught that they should not step to a female in such and such way, but when they go out there and they're exposed to the things that we see all around and the behaviors and the practices, they fall right into exactly what we did not want them to be. For me, for instance, I grew up with my mother and my grandmother. I grew up in the church. My mother had a hair salon, and I used to be there all the time after school waiting for her. And I would have had a particular experience through all of that, where I would have respected women because that is what I was around. That is what I understood and stuff. And later on, when my father was back in my life and stuff, I would have seen things through different eyes. But the fact is that remained with me, those experiences, knowing that you have your grandmother and your mother and you must respect them, and as such you must respect persons the way you want them to be respected. That stuck with me. Persons have sisters, they have cousins, they have nieces, and all these other things, and men really need to now step up to the plate and understand that they should not want or allow what is happening to women to happen to them, because they would not want that to happen to the women in their lives.
The only way for us to successfully address the issue of gender-based violence is through the amendment, or if we change the belief system of citizens. How do we go about changing?
Well, for one, you can't legislate behavior, right? Because I would use, let's say, driving on the bus route as an example, right? We know that we're not supposed to be driving on the bus route. There are laws in place that prevent us or say that we're not supposed to be driving on the bus route. But we will drive on the bus route, and when we see police coming, we will turn off, right? So you cannot legislate behavior. However, you can have things working in tandem. So we do need the insertion of the word gender in our constitution, in how we conduct our business as a country, how we treat with our citizenry as a country. The word gender is very important. But at the same time, we need on the ground these NGOs, these grassroots organizations, to be spreading the message that this is wrong. We need to understand that society, because the fact is, and I was reading this last night, one of the reasons that we have crime, as in any society, is because the expectations seem to not match with the opportunities that are available. So we teach persons that they have to go to university, that they have to get a job right after. Are there jobs afterwards? We teach persons that they have to ascend to these positions in society, but how many of them are given an opportunity to rise to the occasion? And as such, when they realize that this and this does not match, they have to look for an opportunity elsewhere to get to where they think that they are supposed to be. And a lot of these images that are placed in society are unrealistic. Right? You would have some persons getting by and rising to the occasions, but in other cases, you do not have that. So the same thing applies with right now, if you have government officials stating that this is the way it's supposed to be and you're supposed to be able to protect yourself, whatnot, and the other, why are the mechanisms not in place? So it goes right around. Everyone has an active role to play in how we treat with the issue of gender-based violence, in how we treat and protect our women and young girls in society, and then by extension, our boys and our men. Because the fact is, everyone in this country is at risk in some form or the other.
Okay, Nikolai, as we prepare to wrap up, what are your thoughts on the on non-lethal weapons being legalized so women could protect themselves from potentially dangerous situations?
I do think that it is necessary. It is a powerful tool for women to protect themselves. Yes, the argument is, and the criticism is, that some of the perpetrators may be the ones who would actually take up on these things and commit crimes in non-lethal ways and what have you. The fact is that we need to empower women in some way or the other. If we're not doing it legislatively, if we're not doing it with our institutions and stuff, we need to give them the safety and the security or the peace of mind that they can walk and purchase something and that they can carry around this to protect themselves. Since this incident, and even before it, there were persons who were being told, here, go around with this knife. Mothers telling their daughters, walk with a knife and what have you. And even I can say that when I pull up to a traffic light, I lock my doors, and that is an immediate reaction. So imagine far less for a woman who feels powerless simply in the presence of a man on a day-to-day basis. clutching their purse, being in an elevator and pulling to one corner. This is the reality in which we live. So I do think that we should give women the opportunity to purchase non-lethal weapons to protect themselves.
Okay, Nikolai, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on the issue. And so ends this installment of Conversations with C News. Stay tuned as we continue the conversation on the pervasiveness of rape culture here in Trinidad and Tobago and how it can be addressed.